Hi there, and welcome to Critic. Today I'll be walking you through creating your account on Critic and getting started and knowing where you can ask for help and see tutorials on how to access our platform and how to provide an experience where your students can learn from one another through peer evaluation. To get started, please visit our website, critik.io, Kritik.io, and in the upper right-hand corner, click on Sign In/Sign Up. Assuming that you will be a first-time user of the platform, you'll see Don't Have an Account and the option to sign up for an account at the bottom of the page. After clicking on Sign Up, please confirm that you're an instructor, as well as click on Sign Up and choose your university from the list below. Click on Continue to Last Step and plug in your email, password, first name, and last name. After you've filled in your details, you can click on Get Started to create your account. Once you've done that, you'll be prompted to view your Critic dashboard, and a wizard will help you set up your Critic course in 10 easy steps. The pop-up button will ask you to click on Next to view the steps to create your course. It'll highlight the option to click Plus New Course, which will allow you to create the shell for the course that you will be teaching that will be using Critic in the upcoming semester. Click on New Course to access it. You'll see several fields here. The first one is the course name. This is the name of the subject that you are teaching that you want to use Critic for. Next, you'll fill in the subject, so if it falls under a particular discipline or department, you can put in that information there as well. You will be then asked to fill in the description of the course. This is optional, and so you don't need it to complete the creation of your course. You can also add something like a syllabus or any other files that you think would be necessary for your students to interact with. Next is the grading scheme. This grading scheme will explain to you and your students how they will be evaluated in terms of grades throughout the term. Each assignment, or as we like to call them, activities that you create for your students to interact with, will be broken down into 3 major grading criteria. The first one is the creation score. Assuming that you've created an activity for the students to interact with, the creation score is the grade that each student receives by their peers and from you on the work that they submit. So if you're asking your students to do an essay and they submit their essays, the quality of the essay they submit is attributed by their creation score. The second metric, the evaluation score, is built in by 2 components: their ability to grade accurately and also provide strong written feedback to their peers. So as students begin to evaluate, their grading score will look at how close they are to what the other peers are thinking of a particular piece of work. So how close are they to the average consensus grade for a particular piece of work? And their written evaluation score, when students are evaluating the feedback that they receive, they have the option to give a grade out of 4 in terms of how motivational their written feedback is, and a grade out of 4 on how critical their written feedback is. Those 2 components, the grading ability and the quality of your written feedback, contribute to an overall evaluation score. The last score is the feedback score. And this is simply a grade for students. If they participate in the full 3-stage process, they will receive a perfect score here, indicated by the 3rd feedback on feedback stage and their participation with it. These weights can be changed at any time, but this is the most used distribution of grades. Once you've edited the grading scheme and fit it to how your course is designed, you can click on Create Course to actually create the shell within Critic. Clicking on Intro to Peer Evaluation 101 that I just created, you'll see your course dashboard appear here, and this is how you create a course. So now that you've created your course, you can actually create your activities. You'll see that there's no activities yet, but you'll see that there's help videos for each of the 3 stages that each Critic activity goes through. A create stage, where students will actually create the work that they're submitting. An evaluate stage, where students will grade and provide written feedback based on a rubric that you provide them. as well as a feedback on feedback stage, where students will have the opportunity to respond to their peers' evaluations and give them feedback on how to improve their evaluation skill for next time. What you'll need to do is create a series of activities for students to interact with throughout the term. You can click on Create Activity in the upper right-hand corner, and you can, in terms of inspiration, you can check what works best within Critic. For example, some other professors have created questions based on the material, asking the students to read a chapter in a textbook and create a question based on it. Students can create essays, creative content to teach their peers, as well as creative communication. So whether it be presentations, essays, homework sets, problem sets, you name it, they all work really well in Critic through peer review. You'll be asked to give a title to the activity. So let's say your first activity is a simple intro activity to Critic. So intro to Critic activity. You can plug in the title there, and you'll know that this field is mandatory as indicated by the red asterisk beside a title. The objective is the opportunity for you to provide the students with knowledge of why doing these types of activities are important. What sort of learning objectives are important for the students when they're interacting with this activity. For this activity, I think it's important for them to learn how to use the Critic platform. Similarly, with the instructions, you'll be asked to be more explicit. What exactly do they need to write, submit, or provide to have a strong submission for what you're asking them to do? In this case, we are just introducing students to Critic, and we're helping them learn about the peer review process. Here, you'll see that you have an opportunity to actually provide a rubric for the students to interact with, and also use to grade their peers. There are several columns that indicate the levels of quality. Similarly to a rubric you might have seen before, level 0 is the lowest ranking of the quality of work to level 3. Feel free to add multiple levels if you want to make your rubric more granulated and give the students the opportunity to interact with it. There are several criteria pieces that you can include that will help guide your students when evaluating their work. For example, if we're looking at this particular activity, there are several different rubrics that we've created that might fit this activity best. The essay rubric is a great rubric for evaluating written components. We look at the ability to understand the concept, clarity of thoughts, their grammar and spelling, as well as different ideals associated with writing an essay, depending if it's more scientific and depending if it's creative. Now, a rubric of this length would not be helpful for the students as it has 21 pieces of criteria. You can go through the columns and select the ones that you don't think are important for your particular activity. And you can click on the little checkbox to highlight the rows that you want to remove at first. You'll notice that some criteria overlap in definition, so it's important to only leave the ones that you think are unique and best suited for your type of activity. Now that I've highlighted my rubric rows, I can click on minus selected criteria to remove them from my rubric. Now I have only 6 criteria, which is an appropriate range for students when evaluating their peers. You can double-click on any cell within the rubric to interact with it. For example, if I wanted to edit grammar to include grammar and spelling, I can double-click on the cell and start typing in the content for grammar and spelling. Similarly, I can add levels to my rubric to make it more granulated, and each additional level you include will give you the option to edit the content. Perfect grammar and spelling at that particular level. Now that you know how to interact with the rubric, there are several changes that you can make to make it more meaningful. For example, in this particular activity, I think that grammar and spelling is the most important because I want the students in my writing course to begin to develop this ability. So I would adjust the weighting of grammar and spelling to be out of 4 points. Now, when it comes to totaling the creation score, which will be totaled out of this 9-point rubric point distribution, grammar and spelling will have the highest impact on this particular assignment or activity grade. If a student was to receive level 1 out of 4 for grammar and spelling, they would get 1 point here out of the possible 4, and similarly, you can change the point ranges to provide a higher weighting to certain criteria that makes the most sense for you. You have the option to, for simple activities, use a pass-fail system or numeric grading. So if I was a student and I received level 1 on everything, I would get 25% as my total creation score grade for this activity. If I received level 4 on everything, I would receive 100%. And that is our numeric grading system. If you want students for intro activity just to get used to Critic, you can create a use pass fail level system. And just immediately any student who gets past level 2 as proficient in either all the criteria, majority, or any of them will get 100% if they get past level 2 as proficient. You can also change the titles for the levels. If you want the students to be more motivated, you can start with level 0 as needs improvement and work your way across the titles as well. You can save the rubric after you've done your changes and interacted with it. You can always, even after you've created your activity, edit the activity and continue to create new rubrics based on what you've created. Under Advanced Settings, you'll be able to choose how many students each student will be required to evaluate. So the default is 5, and peer review research in our system recommends that you keep this number at 4 or 5 for the first few activities, as this will help the students provide and receive a lot of feedback and our system become more accurate from those large data sets. The minimum you can set is 3 on Critic. In terms of student submission options, depending on what the students are submitting for their activity, you can have them actually submit any file type. So whether it's a Word document, a PDF, a PowerPoint, what have you, it can be attached regardless of what it is. You can have students submit only specific file types. For example, if they're submitting a PowerPoint presentation, you can uncheck all of the submissions and only allow the system to recognize PowerPoints as an official submission. And you can disable attachments altogether. A text box is available to the students in terms of what they can submit. For example, a written activity like this, it would be preferred for the students to just submit it within Critic. So you can disable attachments so they are required to type it within our creation text box. Once you've done that, you can then create the activity. However, activities can be assigned to individual students or to groups. As an individual student, each student will be required to submit their own creation, evaluate some of their peers' work, and provide feedback on feedback to their peers. In group activities, you can manually put students into particular groups, and as a group, the students will submit one submission, and there will be a designated group leader who will submit on behalf of the group. Then, students will individually evaluate the work of other groups. Keep in mind, there is no third feedback on feedback stage for groups, as there is only the create and evaluate stage for group activities. You can only create group activities once you've actually enrolled students to Critic and created the groups yourself. Once you've created the activity, you can click on Create Activity to actually have it in your dashboard, and you'll see Intro to Critic Activity now appear in your dashboard. You will see that it has no set schedule. Any activity that you create, you need to choose the deadlines for when students can interact with it. So you can click on the activity and then click on Schedule Activity to choose the deadlines for when students can submit their work. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 stages for each activity for the students to interact with. In the Create stage, you will choose a time that it'll open the activity and when they need to submit their actual creations by. Students will have the option, if you enable a submission grace period, to submit late. You can choose a time after the deadline of the Create stage and give the students some leeway in submitting some late work. Any student who submits in the grace period, their work will be tagged as a late submission. And you can choose the timing of how long you want that grace period to be. You will then set a deadline for when you want the students to evaluate each other, so to grade it and provide written feedback, and then a third feedback stage deadline for when you want the students to actually provide feedback on feedback. Once you actually schedule the activity will become visible and the students will be able to view it and interact with it. However, as we noticed earlier, the Intro to Critic activity has no set schedule, meaning it will be hidden from the students until you assign it a schedule. Let's say you've built an activity that's similar to other activities you want to run throughout the course. Well, you can click on Edit to actually go into each activity to edit what you've already worked on. So you can edit the title, the objective, the instructions, the rubric, and you can continue to save new rubrics moving forward, and you can change the number of evaluations assigned as well. And if you want to actually build out similar content throughout the term, you can click on those same three dots to clone the activity. By clicking on clone, it'll duplicate to the activity and give you the opportunity to provide changes to the activity title, objective, instructions, and rubric, and click on save to actually duplicate the activity with your new changes. This will allow you to quickly build out some of your content and allow you to focus more time on interacting with the students' work and providing your own comments and feedback. In terms of inviting students to the Critic platform, you can click on the Students tab, and you'll see the option to invite the students in the upper right-hand corner. In here, you will plug in the email addresses of all of the students that are in your course. And once you download the class roster from your LMS, you can copy the column that has all their emails in it, and you can type them in or copy and paste them and send the invite emails to the students for them to join. They will be prompted to join the Critic course and create an account at the time of their signing up. For any instructions on how to invite students or to give instructions for your students to interact with Critic, you can click on the question mark and click on Help Center. Once you've done that, you'll see two Critic guides available, one for professors and one for students. I implore you to check out both of them, especially the student guide, when providing them instructions on how to use Critic throughout the semester. Similarly, in the professor guide, you'll find more instructions on some of the things I've showed you today, how to create activities, rubrics, that grace period and late submission, to things after the activity, like calibration feature and things of that nature. Once you've invited the students, they will appear as all pending until they accept the invitations, at which point certain students who have enrolled will appear under enrolled, and the rest of the class will remain under pending. Once the majority of your class has actually enrolled within Critic, you can click on the Groups tab to actually manually put them within their groups for the semester. You can create multiple group sets, so if you want certain groups to interact with one another throughout the term, you can have different instances of groups by creating multiple group sets. Now that you've got your students enrolled and you've created your activities and scheduled them, it's best for you to learn how Critic will look after you've actually scheduled an activity. By clicking on the pyramid in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that in each account that you create, an example course will appear. And you can click on Collaborate on Course and to join as a collaborator to view a sample course that we've created to help you understand the Critic process. If you click on Example Course, you'll see a course that's live in action with several different activities going through different stages. Each activity, as I mentioned, will go through that create, evaluate, and feedback stage. So feel free to click on each activity to see what your view will look like during each of these stages. After an activity has gone through the 3 stages, it'll go into a limbo grading stage, where students will have the opportunity to flag your attention with the grade dispute. If we click on this activity, question about statistical analysis, we can see that each stage has already been complete, indicated by the green text and check marks, and you can scroll down to see how the students did in the course, or in this particular activity. You'll see that outstanding red grade dispute that appeared in your dashboard earlier. You can click on Waldo's name, and you can see that Waldo White has the ability to request a dispute from you. In terms of the Critic process, this is where you'll see each student's submission and the evaluations they received and provided. So by looking at Waldo, you will see that this was his creation. This particular activity asked the students to create questions. This was Waldo's creation. If he attached it as a file, that file would also appear here as well. Waldo received a 67% on his work, and his creation score is based on Drew's evaluation, as well as Christine's evaluation of his work. In the evaluate stage, Drew had the opportunity to grade Waldo's work. Drew filled in the stars and provided a written comment based on the rubric as well as the submission of Waldo. In the evaluate stage. In the feedback and feedback stage, Waldo has the ability to tell Drew how motivational and how critical that written feedback is. Waldo can see his overall grade based on all the opinions of his evaluators, but he won't be able to see how Drew individually evaluated him until you finalize and complete the activity. You as the instructor can comment on the creations themselves by clicking on Comment on Creation, and you can also override scores by clicking on Edit Score for each student. In Waldo's case, where he disputed the grade, you can click on Manage Dispute, and you can see Waldo's dispute status. Each student has the ability to dispute their grade once per activity, and they cannot be reopened after you resolve it. You can read the reason for dispute and make a judgment call on whether you think the score needs to be overridden. You can provide your reasoning to Waldo here, and you can click on Edit Score to make the changes, or you can type them into the box yourself. If you think he deserved 80% on this particular category, you can type it into the box, or you can give half stars and fill in the stars for the grade that you think Waldo deserves. If you choose to edit the score, it will override the other students' grades that they gave, but as an evaluator, they will now have the ability to compare their grading to you because you overrided these scores. You would click on Save and Submit, and you will see that a green check mark will appear for every student that you edit grades for. So now that Waldo has a dispute here as red, once you go in and actually type in the answer to his dispute and resolve it, that red person will become green. Once you've resolved all of the disputes and edited the grades and provided the comments on the creation or the evaluations themselves, you can go back and finalize the activity. Once you finalize the activity will appear here at the bottom as finalized and graded, and in each student's account, they will begin to receive their grades for each of the 3 grading metrics: their creation score, their evaluation score, and their feedback score. The students can reach out to you or reach out to us if they have any questions about understanding the score, and you can also continue to provide comments even though an activity will be finalized and graded. Once you have finalized an activity, you cannot go back and edit grades within, so it's important to make all grade changes before finalizing the activity. What's really important after the first activity is to calibrate it. A calibration will help the students and you show each other their grading ability, and it'll help the system learn how the students should be grading moving forward. After you finalize an activity, you can click on Create Activity, change the activity type to calibration, and it'll only show you the activities that you finalized. For example, if we click on Lab Session 1, which is an activity that was finalized in this example course, and we call this a grading exercise, it'll have a calibration tag beside it, so no need to put calibration in the title. It'll show you the exact same objective and instructions and rubric from that Lab Session 1 activity, and it'll ask you to choose 3 submissions from the list. Ideally, you would choose them of varying quality: a lower score submission, a mediocre one, and a strong one, to get the best results for the student's ability as graders. You click on Select Creation, and you'd start from the lowest. For example, we look at John Doe's submission, and you are going to grade the submissions yourselves. Keep in mind, you've already finalized the activity, so the student's grade that they received, in this case, John Doe got a 52%, you changing it here won't impact what he already got. This is an extra activity to help the system learn how to calibrate that won't count towards their grades. And so the student submission that you're choosing, you will have to edit the grade manually and give the grade that you think is deserving of this submission. You'll click on Save, and you'll select it, and you'll do it twice more. Keep in mind, it's important that you not be biased by the students' grades that they gave each other, as we want the system to calibrate to your opinion of grading. You will do it 3 times. You'll select the creation from the list, and you'll give it your own grades. And after you've done that, you will create the activity. Just like any other activity, you'll be asked to schedule the activity to make it visible. You click on the activity, click on Schedule, and you're only putting in the due date for calibration, the evaluate stage. The students are going to only grade those 3 submissions. The whole class will individually fill in the stars for each of those 3 that you chose, and after you finalize the calibration, the students and the system will learn how they should be grading moving forward, and it'll help identify how students should be grading. Calibration activities and regular activities impact what we call a grading power. And as the system and the activities progress throughout the term, students will have the ability to show how strong of an evaluator they are. If they're grading correctly and providing really strong feedback, their grading power will either increase or decrease, and they'll have a higher say or a more valued opinion when calculating the average creation scores throughout the term. It's really important for the students to know this, as their opinion matters if they really want to be stronger evaluators. In terms of the Critic platform, you now know how to create activities, how to provide your own comments and your own feedback, and how to finalize and calibrate activities and invite your students. As I mentioned earlier, clicking on this question mark and clicking on the Help Center will take you to our guides list where you can get in-depth tutorials on everything to do with Critic, including accessing your course roster to get your student emails, running calibration, how to download your gradebook, and some other features as well. If you or your students have any questions moving forward, they can always contact our live chat support by clicking on the chat icon in the bottom right-hand corner of Critic and sending a message. From 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday in Eastern Time, our team will reply to you in under 5 minutes in the form of email or on chat. Outside of those business hours, our team will typically get back to you within 6 to 12 hours, and we're always here to help if you have any problems understanding how to use Critic, signing up, and things of that nature. So please, contact our team, whether you're a professor or as a student, and we'll be happy to help you moving forward. We hope that your experience with Critic this term goes swimmingly well, and we hope that we can be of assistance and help you and your students get more comfortable with the peer review process within your class. Please get in touch with us if you have any questions moving forward.